Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. I was at a job site checking the grid system when my cell phone lit up. My son Mason's phone call split my quiet life like a bolt of lightning. Dad? His voice trembled, almost unrecognizable. Mom and Uncle Dominic are at the Red Moon Hotel, doing things I can't explain. I'm sending you a video. That video was only about 10 seconds long. My jaw nearly dropped to the floor when I saw the entwined figures of Audrey and Dominic in the picture. 15 years of marriage collapsed in those 10 seconds. I told Mason to go home immediately and then quickly dialed my lawyer. When Audrey returned home the next day with a face full of guilt, the house was empty. The deposit in our joint account was gone, and the divorce papers sat neatly on the kitchen counter. Mason and I disappeared without a trace. She'll never see us again. But that's not where the story begins. What was our life like before the betrayal? How did Audrey fall step by step into the abyss of betrayal? And why did I choose this form of revenge? Nolan Fraser never thought there was anything special about his life. Everything he does, waking up at 5 a.m. every morning, putting on his heavy coveralls to make sure the city's power grid is functioning properly, and going home in the evening to play basketball with his son or help him with his science homework, is a regular part of life for him. He loved his wife, Audrey, and son, Mason, and was content to provide a comfortable and stable home life. Nolan and Audrey's meeting was quite dramatic. 16 years ago, when Toronto suffered a rare large-scale power outage, Nolan, as a freshly minted power engineer, was dispatched to various neighborhoods to perform emergency restoration work. It's in the midst of this chaos that he meets Audrey, who is trapped in a high-rise apartment due to an elevator malfunction. When he assisted the power company team in rescuing the trapped residents, Audrey's green eyes that sparkled in the flashlight light and her humorous approach to the crisis immediately captivated him. You know, I've always wanted to experience one of those movie scenes where you're rescued by a hero, but I didn't think my hero would be wearing such an unromantic uniform. Audrey teased this at the time, with a tired but sincere smile on his face. After that encounter, they quickly fell in love, got married a year later, and welcomed the birth of their son Mason another year later. For the first few years of marriage, everything was as good as a fairy tale. Audrey started out as an interior designer and then moved on to become a real estate agent, where her sociable nature helped her to gain a foothold in the industry. However, over time, the mundane routine of everyday life begins to dull Audrey's inner desire for excitement and novelty. She attends various high-end client parties more and more frequently and comes home later and later. Nolan notices the changes, but he sees them as a normal necessity for his wife's career and never suspects anything. "Are you going out to see clients again tonight?" Nolan asked one Friday night while preparing dinner. "Yes, there's a potential buyer interested in a mansion in the Rosedale neighborhood worth a couple million," Audrey replied as she put on her makeup with a tone of undisguised excitement. "Do you need Mason and I to wait for you for dinner?" "No, I might be late. You guys eat first." Audrey seemed so eager to leave that she didn't even kiss Nolan on the cheek like she usually does. Conversations like this have become more and more common over the past few months. Nolan notices that Audrey begins to pay more attention to her appearance, buying expensive new clothes, making frequent trips to the salon to change her hairstyle, and beginning to use more high-end cosmetics. At first, he thought it was just a necessary investment for her to establish a professional image in the competitive real estate market. Audrey's inner changes are more complex than the outer ones. Despite having a loving husband and a smart son, she began to feel that something was missing from her life. As she got older, she became increasingly concerned that her charisma was fading and her career was hitting a bottleneck. She began to envy the women who seemed to be living more glamorous lives, the ones who Instagrammed luxury vacations and designer clothes. "Mom, why are you always looking at your phone and sighing?" Mason asked one night, keenly aware of his mother's changing mood. "It's nothing, baby, just some stress at work," Audrey replied perfunctorily, quickly locking her phone screen. In fact, Audrey is perusing the lavish lives some of her clients share on social media. She began to question her life choices, wondering if she had settled down too early, if she had missed out on too many possibilities. This sentiment had been creeping in even before she met Dominic Wallace. Dominic Wallace didn't come into Audrey's life by accident. An internationally acclaimed architect, he came to Toronto to work on a high-end commercial project and found Audrey, through her professional network to help him find temporary housing. Their first meeting took place on a sunny afternoon in a luxury condominium in Toronto's Lakeshore neighborhood. Dressed in a well-tailored suit, Dominic is elegant and well-spoken. As he talks about his projects in Paris, Tokyo, and Dubai, Audrey feels that his world has suddenly expanded. The view is great, but my apartment in Barcelona has a direct view of the Mediterranean. Dominic commented casually, while admiring the Toronto skyline outside his apartment window. But I think a short stay of a few months here should be comfortable enough. Barcelona? I've always dreamed of going there. Audrey's unconscious yearning flowed. Next time if you go there, make sure you contact me. I can recommend some hidden places to go that tourists won't find. Dominic smiled and handed her a business card, his fingers lightly grazing her palm. That simple touch made Audrey's heart race. It had been a long time since she had felt this kind of heartbeat. Over the next few weeks, Dominic meets with Audrey under a variety of pretexts, from inquiring about more properties to inviting her to important business dinners. At first, Audrey told herself it was just a working relationship and a great opportunity to expand her network of high-end clients. She even mentioned Dominic to Nolan, describing him as a potentially important client. He's interested in high-end Toronto real estate and will probably bring in a lot of international clients. Audrey explains her frequent meetings with Dominic to Nolan this way. Nolan trusted his wife and never expressed doubt. "It sounds like a great opportunity," he had said sincerely, "and I hope it works out." But over time, Audrey and Dominic's relationship begins to go beyond the professional. Dominic is well-versed in psychological manipulation, and he keenly picks up on Audrey's inner dissatisfaction and longings and exploits them. He would make a conscious reference in conversation to Nolan's inability to understand her ambitions and talents, suggesting that she deserved a wider world. "An intelligent and attractive woman like you deserves more." A private dinner, Dominic whispered, while pouring her expensive red wine. "Have you ever wondered where you would be now if you had made a different choice?" Such words were like a drop of water falling into the parched ground, awakening Audrey's deepest longing. She begins to immerse herself in the excitement and novelty Dominic brings her, gradually neglecting the warmth of her family and Nolan's concern. At the same time, she started lying to Nolan more often. "I'm sorry, I have an important client who needs to see a house urgently tonight," or "the company has arranged a training course and I have to attend," have become her common excuses. In reality, she was spending time with Dominic, reveling in his carefully woven fantasy world. She told herself that it was a temporary indulgence that wouldn't hurt the family. She was confident that she could control the situation and keep her marriage intact while enjoying the thrill. This self-deception gradually made her lose her judgment of reality. The turning point of things happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. That day, Mason returned home from an early school dismissal to find his mother's cell phone left on the living room coffee table. When his cell phone lights up to show a new message, Mason overhears a flirty text from Dominic. "Last night was great. Can't wait to see you again at the Red Moon. Room 718, 4 p.m. Mason is confused and upset. He knew that his mother's behavior had become strange lately, but never thought it would be for this reason. He decides to follow his mother to confirm his suspicions. That afternoon, he lied about going to a friend's house to study, but actually traveled to the Red Moon Hotel. People come and go in the hotel lobby, and no one notices a nervous teenager. He saw his mother enter the elevator and pressed the button for the 7th floor. A few minutes later, he too went up the stairs and cautiously made his way to the door of room 718. Through the not-quite-closed doorway, he saw a scene that was enough to confirm his worst imaginings. With trembling hands, he took out his cell phone and recorded the short video evidence, then fled the scene, his heart full of betrayal and anger. On the bus ride home, Mason's insides warred. Should he tell his father? Will this destroy their family? But the bigger question is, if he stays silent, will he be able to continue to face his mother without revealing what he knows to be true? In the end, loyalty to his father and a desire for the truth overcame other considerations. He dialed Nolan's number, his voice shaking with emotion. "Dad, Mom, and Uncle Dominic are at the Red Moon Hotel, doing things I can't explain. I'm sending you a video." Nolan was conducting a routine inspection at a substation on the city's east side when he received the call from his son. His first reaction to hearing his son's words was confusion, But when he clicked on the video to see what it was about, he felt a wave of confusion. Though the video is short, the content is clear enough. Audrey and Dominic are cuddling and kissing intimately in their hotel room, and the two are certainly behaving in a way that goes beyond the bounds of any reasonable professional relationship. At that moment, he felt that his 15 years of marriage was like a carefully constructed sandcastle being mercilessly washed away by the waves of reality. His breathing became rapid and his fingers slid feebly across the keyboard as he tried to reply to a message to his son. "Mason, listen to me. Go home immediately. Don't tell Mom what you saw or that you contacted me. I'll be back as soon as I can and we'll face this together." After hanging up, Nolan felt a strong wave of nausea. He called in sick to his supervisor and drove home with a myriad of thoughts tumbling through his mind. The anger, sadness, confusion, and sense of betrayal were so intertwined that it was almost impossible for him to concentrate on driving. When he got home, he found Mason in his room, pale and with red eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad." Mason choked out. "I didn't know what to do." Nolan hugged his son tightly and forced himself to hold back his emotions. "You did the right thing, Mason. You don't have to apologize for other people's mistakes." That night, during a long conversation between father and son, Nolan learns all about Audrey's unusual behavior in recent months: frequent overtime, work, strange phone calls, and dressing up for events that aren't family functions. All of these details are pieced together to paint a heartbreaking picture of betrayal. "What do we do now?" Mason asked, his voice filled with fear for the future. Nolan took a deep breath and replied calmly, "I need some time to think about it, but one thing is for sure: I won't let anyone hurt you, and I won't let this betrayal go without consequences." Later that night, Audrey sent a message stating that she was staying out overnight for an important post-real estate showing social event. Nolan replied with a simple yes, but in his mind, he was already planning his next move. He doesn't act on impulse. He needs a plan, one that will protect him and Mason while making Audrey pay for her betrayal. It's not just about revenge. It's about rebuilding and protecting the future of their father and son. That night, when Mason finally went to sleep, Nolan sat in his study, turned on his computer, and began his research. He began by contacting a reputable divorce attorney and scheduling an appointment for an emergency consultation early the next morning. He then examined their joint accounts and the status of their assets, thinking about how to protect their financial interests to the extent permitted by law. Finally, he drafted a long email to his supervisor requesting a transfer to the company's branch in British Columbia. It was a position he had the opportunity to accept years ago, but turned down because he didn't want to disrupt his family life. Now it could be the beginning of a new life for him and Mason. When the clock strikes midnight, Nolan's plan takes shape. He will not question angrily as many betrayed husbands do. There will be no scenes of hysteria, no violence or threats. His vengeance will be calm, planned, and thorough, just as he handles every problem at work. He shut down his computer and walked over to the window, looking out at the serene night view of Toronto. Tomorrow, when Audrey returns home, she will find that everything she held dear is gone. The thought gave him a strange calm, like the silence before a storm. Nolan's eyes had been open for a long time when the first rays of Toronto's morning light penetrated the clouds. In fact, he stayed up almost all night thinking over every detail of his plan. As an engineer, he's used to systems thinking and problem solving, and now he's applying those skills to the most painful crisis of his life. When he got up to wash, his reflection in the mirror showed his tired eyes and tight jawline. It's not anger, at least not just anger. It is a calm resolve, a sobering realization born of deep betrayal. Mason was already waiting at the table, eating his breakfast in silence. The boy had noticeable dark circles under his eyes, and it was obvious he hadn't slept well either. "How did you sleep last night?" Nolan asked softly while pouring himself a cup of black coffee. "Not so good," Mason replied honestly. "I've been thinking about Mom and—" His voice faded. "I know," Nolan nodded, taking a seat across from his son. "It's going to be a tough day, but I need you to trust me. I have a plan, but it takes time and patience." He briefly explained the arrangements for the day. Mason would go to school as normal, Nolan would pick him up after school, and then they would discuss the plans in more detail. "Stay normal at school today," Nolan urged. "And don't tell anyone what happened." including your best friend. It's important, Mason. Mason nodded gravely. I understand, Dad. After dropping Mason off at school, Nolan immediately executes the first step of his plan. He drove to a gray stone building in downtown Toronto that housed the law firm of Harrington and Simmons. He made an appointment last night via emergency contact with Eleanor Simmons, one of the most respected divorce lawyers in Canada. Eleanor's office reflects her personality, efficient, tidy, and free of unnecessary frills. As Nolan showed the video and other evidence taken by Mason, her expression remained professionally calm throughout. This is very clear evidence of infidelity, Eleanor said, closing her laptop. But I need to know what you want, Nolan. Is it a quick and calm resolution, or? I want justice, Nolan replied, his voice low and clear, not revenge. But I'm not going to let her just get away with it either. Eleanor nodded, seeming to appreciate his calmness. In Canada, divorce law is based on no fault, meaning that infidelity itself won't give you a special advantage in property division. But with such evidence, we can take the initiative in negotiations, especially regarding child custody. Over the next 2 hours, they discussed various legal options and strategies in detail. Eleanor explained the principle of equitable division, which means that assets acquired during the marriage are generally considered community property, but there are exceptions. Regarding your joint account, Eleanor said as she flipped through the papers, you are entitled to withdraw half of the funds for reasonable living expenses and legal fees. However, I recommend documenting every expense and keeping all receipts. Courts value transparency. On the advice of his attorney, Nolan immediately executed the next step. He went to 3 different banks and opened new personal accounts for each. He then visited a 4th bank, the location of his and Audrey's joint account. I need to transfer some funds, he told the bank manager, his voice calm. 50% of the total account amount to be exact. The bank manager verified his identity, confirmed his rights as a joint account holder, and then processed the transfer. Nolan felt a strange calm as the numbers flowed off the screen, confirming the transfer was complete. It's not just about the money. It's about regaining control of the balance of a life shattered by betrayal. After leaving the bank, he traveled to the headquarters of the power company where he worked. His boss, Diane, had long noticed his recent stress at work, and when he asked to speak privately, she immediately agreed. In the closed conference room, Nolan explained the situation bluntly. I need to transfer to the Vancouver branch. It's not temporary, it's permanent. Diane's expression changed from shock to sympathy. Nolan, I'm sorry to hear that. I know the company has been proposing that you go over there to lead the new program, but you've declined for family reasons. Now things have changed. Yes, Nolan replied simply. Things have changed. Due to his excellent track record and the company's need for his skills, the transfer request was quickly approved. The Human Resources Department is committed to processing all necessary documents within 48 hours. I need this to remain a secret, he told Diane before leaving, at least for a while. Diane nodded understandingly. Of course, it's your personal business. The next step is to arrange accommodation. Nolan knows that finding the right apartment in the short term is nearly impossible, especially in a competitive real estate market like Vancouver. He contacted his best friend from college, Garrett, who now works in the tech industry in Vancouver. Of course you can stay at my place, Garrett enthused over the phone. I have plenty of room. You and Mason can stay as long as you want until you find the right place. What happened? Nolan briefly explained the situation, avoiding painful details. Damn, man, that's too bad, Garrett said after a moment of silence. Whatever you need, just ask. That simple statement sent a wave of gratitude through Nolan. In the midst of this storm, it is a comfort to know that there are still people who support him. For the next few hours, he took care of all sorts of practical matters, booking a flight to Vancouver for tomorrow morning, contacting Mason's school to arrange a transfer, and collecting important documents such as birth certificates, passports, and medical records. With each task he accomplished, the burden inside him lightened, replaced by a strange calm. Late in the afternoon, Nolan returned home and began packing. He works in an organized manner, methodically addressing every detail as if it were an engineering problem. Take only truly necessary and personal items, clothing, electronic equipment, a few precious souvenirs. For community property, He followed his attorney's advice to take photographs to document and make a detailed list so that it could be equitably divided at a later date. As he was organizing Mason's room, his fingers touched a thick photo album. Turning to the first page, he saw a picture of his and Audrey's wedding. She was wearing a simple, elegant white wedding dress, her face beaming with pure joy. Further back are photos of Mason's birth, family vacations together, birthday parties, and random snapshots from ordinary weekends. Each one holds a memory, each one now tainted by the shadow of betrayal. Nolan felt a sharp pain in his chest and had to sit down to take a deep breath. Anger and sadness were intertwined within him, running through him like an electric current. This was the moment he finally allowed himself to fully feel the emotions he had been trying to suppress all day. But he allowed this weakness to last only a few short minutes. As he stood up and got back to work, his resolve strengthened. It's not just about punishing Audrey. It's about creating a new beginning for him and Mason, a future free of lies and betrayal. After packing up, he headed to Mason's school to pick him up. As soon as the boy got in the car, he was keenly aware of the suitcase in the back seat. "We're leaving tonight?" he asked, both fear and anticipation in his voice. "Yes," Nolan confirmed. "We're staying at the airport hotel tonight and flying to Vancouver early tomorrow morning." "That's sudden. Sometimes it's better to simply cut off than to slowly tear at the wound," Nolan explained, his gaze still fixed on the road ahead. "Besides, I'm worried that if your mother finds out what we're planning, she'll try to stop us, especially by taking you." "Can she do it?" Mason asked, suddenly looking nervous. "Legally stopping us?" "In theory, yes. Although you are old enough to express your wishes, the legal process can be complicated. I don't want to take that chance." Mason was silent for a moment, digesting this information. "What about Mom? When will she know?" "When she comes home tomorrow," Nolan replied, his voice quiet but firm. "She'll find us gone, the divorce papers prepared, and only her half left in our joint account." "That sounds cold," Mason said hesitantly. Nolan briefly turned his eyes from the road to his son. "Then what she did?" "Mason, revenge can take many forms. Some people choose violence or public shaming, but that only hurts everyone, including ourselves. The way I chose to do it was a clean cut-off. No arguing, no finger-pointing, just simply leaving and starting over. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation." Mason nodded slowly, as if beginning to understand his father's logic. Back at home, they finished the final preparations together. After careful consideration, Nolan decides to leave a short letter and divorce papers on the center island in the kitchen. In the letter, he wrote only a few sentences, clear enough, but without unnecessary emotion. "Audrey, Mason and I know about your affair with Dominic. We've left. The divorce papers are here and my attorney will contact you. Don't try to find us. Nolan." This brevity is not born of cowardice, but of carefully calculated calm. No hysterical accusations, no emotional outbursts, just cold hard facts and clear boundaries. For Nolan, this is more powerful than any heated confrontation. It sends a clear message that her behavior has broken the bond between them so completely that it's not even worth his time to express his anger. As he prepares to leave, Nolan takes one last look around the home where their family of 3 has lived for 10 years. Every corner holds memories. The living room floor where Mason was a toddler, the dining room table that has seen countless family dinners, the furniture and decor he and Audrey had chosen together. 15 years of shared life condensed between these walls will now be in the past. He felt a sharp pang of pain, not only for himself, but for Mason, and even to some extent for Audrey. She would never know exactly what she had lost until it was too late. "Dad," Mason stood in the doorway with the last of his backpack in his hand. "Are you okay?" Nolan took a deep breath and forced himself back to reality. "I'm fine." "Ready?" Mason nodded, both tears and determination in his eyes. "Ready." They left the house, and Nolan carefully locked the door and put the key in the mailbox, his last symbolic gesture. As they drove away from the neighborhood, he took one last look through the rearview mirror at the place he once called home. There was no turning back, no hesitation, only the firm determination of a new life ahead. Such is the nature of his vengeance, not a destructive outburst, but a calm, methodical, and complete severance. He won't pursue Audrey's pain, but he won't protect her from the consequences of her actions either. He would leave with dignity, leaving her alone to face the ruins of her own making. In his hotel room near the Toronto airport, Mason fell fast asleep, his exhausting day finally over. But Nolan is still awake, standing at the window overlooking the city lights. Tomorrow, they will fly to Vancouver to start a new life. Audrey, on the other hand, will return to an empty home and face the cold reality of her choices. It's a no-win war, Nolan thought to himself. But at least he and Mason will have a chance to rebuild instead of continuing to live in the shadow of a lie. This wasn't revenge, he told himself. This was rebirth. But deep down, he knew the line between the two was sometimes so blurred. By the time Audrey returns home from her date with Dominic, the Toronto sky is tinted with the orange-red color of evening. Her feelings are mixed and conflicted. The time she spent with Dominic still leaves her feeling excited and desired, but deep down, a sense of guilt begins to creep in. Lately, that guilt had become stronger whenever she saw Mason's distant eyes or Nolan's tired smile. Today, that guilt reaches a new level. When Dominic suggested flying to Montreal together the following weekend, she found herself hesitating. She secretly decided that maybe it was time to end this dangerous relationship. She told herself that she had gotten what she needed, that feeling of being appreciated and desired, that confirmation of her self-worth. Now she can refocus on her family and repair the cracks that are starting to appear. After all, she's still in love with Nolan and Mason, or at least that's what she believes. These thoughts swirled around as she drove home. She imagined a possible scene when she got home. Mason was probably doing his homework, and Nolan was probably preparing dinner. She would propose a weekend trip to Niagara Falls together, a family trip to reconnect them. However, when she opened the door to her home, she was greeted by an otherworldly silence. There was no sound of the TV, no Mason's music, no sound of Nolan busying himself in the kitchen. The house was surprisingly quiet, as if drained of life. "Nolan? Mason?" she shouted, her voice loud in the empty room. No response. Her heart began to race. Maybe they went out? But Nolan's car is still in the driveway. She walked towards the kitchen and immediately noticed something was out of place. Gone are the sticky notes and Mason's artwork that are usually plastered all over the refrigerator. When I opened the fridge, there was significantly less food in it, with only a few basic items left. A sense of foreboding gripped her. She walked quickly to Mason's room and pushed the door open to find the closet open and empty. His favorite basketball posters, video games, books, all gone. With growing panic, she rushed to the master bedroom. Nolan's closet is similarly half empty. The drawer was half open and his watch case and tie rack were missing. "What's going on?" she murmured, fear spreading through her chest. Just then she noticed a stack of papers and a note on the island in the kitchen. She approached slowly, her fingers trembling as she picked up the piece of paper. Her world came crashing down as she read the short, cold message. "Audrey, Mason and I know about your affair with Dominic. We've left. The divorce papers are here and my attorney will contact you. Don't try to find us. Nolan." "No. No way," she muttered, her legs weakening and having to hold on to the kitchen counter to stay on her feet. Her trembling fingers flipped through the divorce papers, and she felt a wave of heavenly relief when she saw the video Mason had shot listed as evidence. Her son saw her betrayal. That realization broke her heart more than any other consequence. She thought back to Mason's strange behavior in recent weeks, his sudden silences, averted eyes, leaving early and staying late. Now everything was explained. He knew, and she hadn't even noticed the signs of his pain because she was so focused on her own desires. In a panic, she immediately called Nolan's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried calling Mason's number again, with the same result. She frantically sent text messages, one after the other, ranging from anger to pleading, from explanations to apologies. "Nolan, please pick up the phone. We need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding about all this. Please, at least let me explain. I'm sorry, I really am. Please tell me where you are. Mason, baby, please call mommy back. I love you." But all the messages were like a stone dropped into the sea without any response. For the next few hours, Audrey frantically searched her home for any possible clues. She rummaged through every drawer and checked every nook and cranny, hoping to find any information that would indicate where they were going. But Nolan has obviously planned carefully and left no trace. As night fell, she began calling mutual friends. The first was their neighbor Linda. "I'm sorry, Audrey." Linda's voice was cold and distant. "I don't know where they went." But her tone reveals more. She knows what's going on and is clearly on Nolan's side. Next up is Nolan's coworker Chris, who used to throw barbecue parties together all the time. "This is not a good time, Audrey," he said briefly, then hung up quickly. One by one, each call ended in a similar way: cold, awkward, or openly hostile. By the end of the night, Audrey is painfully aware that Nolan has taken not only Mason, but most of their social circle. He must have informed their friends of her infidelity, isolating her completely. "That's not fair," she shouted at the empty house, her voice breaking with anger and despair. But deep down, she knew it was perfectly fair. This is the result of her own choices. The next morning, she woke up with red eyes and a heavy heart. She spent the night on the couch, unable to face the large bed that was now hers alone. A new day brings a new blow. She heads to the bank and discovers that their joint account has been cut in half. Although Nolan only took the portion that was legally his, it still meant that her financial situation suddenly became precarious. Then she contacted Mason's school and learned that he had already gone through the transfer process. The school could not provide more information, claiming it was a private family matter, but the principal looked at her with judgment. As she walked out of the school gates, she was overwhelmed with shame. She had been here for countless parent-teacher conferences and school events, and now she was the subject of gossip because of her behavior. The last hope is Nolan's sister Valerie. Though they were never exactly close, Valerie always felt Audrey didn't value her brother enough. Valerie was probably the only person who could tell her the whereabouts of Nolan and Mason. She plucked up the courage to dial the number. It rang for a long time, and just when she thought no one would answer, Valerie picked up the phone. "Audrey." Valerie's voice was cold as winter. No greetings, no pleasantries, just a name that cut between the two like a sharp knife. "Valerie, please." Audrey's voice trembled. "I just want to know if they're safe and where they are. I'm Mason's mother. I have a right to know." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then a deep sigh. "They're safe. That's all you need to know," Valerie finally replied, without a hint of sympathy in her voice. "As for the rest, I think Nolan made it pretty clear. He doesn't want you to contact them." "But Mason is my son," Audrey exclaimed in near hysteria, tears welling up again. "Legally, I have a right to see him." "Yes, he is your son." Valerie's tone was calm but sharp as a knife. "But he's also a big enough kid to understand what's going on and make his own choices. He chose to stay with his father, Audrey. Maybe you should think about why." "It's not fair," Audrey sobbed. "Nolan has no right to punish me like this." "Punish you?" For the first time, Valerie's voice wavered with emotion. "You betrayed a man who loved you for 15 years, let your son witness your infidelity, and then you say Nolan is punishing you?" She paused, clearly controlling her anger. "Audrey, I'm not telling you this to hurt you, but I want you to understand. This isn't about punishment. This is about consequences. Every choice has consequences, and these are brought about by your choices." The call ends there, leaving Audrey alone, completely isolated and facing the full consequences of her actions. The next few days gradually morphed into weeks as the weight of reality began to crush her mercilessly. The first is the economic blow. Although Nolan did not resort to any illegal means, he shrewdly divided their finances. The joint credit card was frozen, leaving her with only limited funds in her personal account. The house is still partially hers, but maintaining it requires far more than she can afford right now. The professional blow was even more severe. Audrey's success as a realtor relies heavily on her reputation and connections in the community. However, news of her infidelity seems to be spreading at an alarming rate. One client canceled an appointment, claiming to have found a more suitable broker. Then the second, the third. The most devastating blow came from her biggest client, Lawrence Peterson, who had promised to put her in charge of the sales of his new luxury condo development. "We need to rethink our partnership," Lawrence said during an awkward meeting. "Given the recent development, I'm concerned that you may not be able to devote yourself fully to this project." "What development?" Audrey tried to pretend she didn't know, but her reddened eyes and haggard face gave it all away. Lawrence just averted his eyes uneasily. "Toronto is a small place, Audrey. The real estate circle is even smaller." It suddenly dawned on her. Nolan hadn't aggressively spread the word about her infidelity, but he hadn't kept it a secret either. He just let the facts spread naturally and let her face the judgment of public opinion. This is more effective than any direct retaliation. What's ironic is Dominic's reaction. When her world falls apart, she expects at least some support from the man who caused it all. But his text messages are cold and selfish. What's wrong? Why don't you return my calls? We agreed to meet today. There was no concern, no inquiry as to whether she was all right. Only irritation at the failure to fulfill the engagement. The man who had once fascinated her so much suddenly seemed so shallow and selfish. She replied with a simple message. It's all over. Please don't contact me again. Dominic's reaction reveals even more of his true colors. Are you serious? That's it. Then came more messages, ranging from anger to pleading, almost a sarcastic mirror image of her own text messages to Nolan. Eventually, when she insisted on not responding, he sent one last message, suit yourself. I'm leaving Toronto next week anyway. And just like that, the object of her betrayal of everything has abandoned her. Dominic never really cared for her, just enjoyed the thrill of conquering a married woman. Instead, she destroyed 15 years of marriage and her relationship with her son for such a superficial relationship. As the days pass, Audrey begins to really face the full consequences of her actions. She has lost her husband, her son, most of her friends, her professional reputation, and maybe even her home. All because of her selfishness and short-sightedness. The most painful part was the separation from Mason. Counsel told her that, given the child's age and his clearly expressed wishes, the court would likely honor his decision to live with his father, although she might be granted visitation rights. But visitation rights require knowing where they are, and that's exactly the kind of information Nolan has managed to hide. One night, on yet another lonely night, she found herself sitting in Mason's room, clutching a teddy bear he'd left behind, a gift from Nolan on his 5th birthday, which was now the only tangible evidence that her son had ever existed. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks, and for the first time she fully understood the hurt her actions had caused her family. What the hell did I do? She whispered into the empty room, answered only by the sound of the wind outside the window and the remorse inside her. Late at night, as all of Toronto falls asleep, Audrey realizes that Nolan's revenge is more complete than any violence or public humiliation. Instead of vehemently accusing or threatening her, he chose to cut off and silence her completely. He left her alone with her choices, making pain and regret her most faithful companions. The subtlety of this revenge lies in its complete legality and moral irreproachability. Nolan didn't do anything wrong. He protected himself and his son and rebuilt their lives while letting her bear the full consequences of his actions. No dramatic confrontations, no vicious retaliation, just a calm, organized, and thorough departure. It is a cold and precise justice whose power is more enduring and profound than any outburst of anger. When Audrey finally realizes this, she understands that she has lost everything, and it's all of her own making. In the silence of that night, Audrey Fraser embarks on a long journey of self-reflection, confronting the loneliness and remorse she has chosen for herself. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, on the west coast of Canada, Nolan and Mason are officially starting their new lives. Garrett helped them find a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in North Vancouver, close to both Nolan's new office and the new school Mason will be attending. The first night they moved into their new home, they simply ate takeout pizza and sat on the living room floor, which was not yet fully furnished. It feels weird, Mason said, looking around the nearly empty room, like we're runaways or something. Nolan understands how his son feels. Despite Mason's show of strength, this sudden change was undoubtedly a huge shock to a 14-year-old. We're not running away, Nolan explained softly. We're starting over. Sometimes, when a relationship can't be fixed, the best option is to start over. Do you hate Mom? Mason asked directly, confusion and pain shining in his eyes. Nolan sighed deeply and thought hard about the question. No, I don't hate her, he finally replied. I'm angry and disappointed in what she did, but hatred will only lead us to misery. I choose to look forward and focus on our future. Mason nodded as if digesting his father's words. And will we ever see her again? Not right now, Nolan replied honestly. We all need time and space to process this. In the future, when the wound is not so fresh, we can reconsider. But right now, we need to focus on adapting to life here. Over the next few weeks, they gradually adapted to their new surroundings. Nolan began his work in the Vancouver branch, overseeing a major grid upgrade project. Despite the pressures of the job, it was a relief to be able to immerse himself in a professional challenge that allowed him to forget the turmoil of his personal life for a while. Mason, on the other hand, started classes at his new school. The first few days were tough, and as a freshman who transferred halfway through the year, he felt out of place. But soon, he met several like-minded students in his science class and began to forge new friendships. The school's football coach also noticed his athleticism and invited him to join the varsity team. On weekends, father and son explore all corners of Vancouver, from hiking on Glarus Mountain to cycling trails in Stanley Park, from art markets on Granville Island to cafes in Kitsilano. These activities have helped them build a deeper father-son relationship while healing the wounds of the heart. Meanwhile, Nolan's attorney, Eleanor, continues to handle the divorce. Audrey initially tried to fight for joint custody, but when Mason made it clear that he wanted to live with his father, she had to back down. Eventually, they came to an agreement that Mason would live primarily with Nolan and that Audrey would have visitation rights, but would need to make arrangements and get Mason's consent in advance. With respect to the division of property, the parties' attorneys engaged in lengthy negotiations. Eventually, their Toronto house was sold and the proceeds split equally. Nolan relinquished his claim to Audrey's personal jewelry and a portion of his investment in exchange for full ownership of their vacation cottage. The entire legal process took nearly 6 months, during which time Nolan and Audrey had little direct interaction and all communication was conducted through their attorneys. Mason occasionally talks to his mother on the phone, but these conversations are usually brief and awkward, filled with unspoken emotions and accusations. Before you know it, it's been a year since they left Toronto. Life in Vancouver is becoming familiar and comfortable. Nolan has been recognized for his performance at the company and was recently promoted to Regional Technical Director. Mason has adapted well, not only excelling academically, but also finding a sense of belonging on the football team. One evening, as they were enjoying dinner on the balcony with a beautiful view of the North Shore Mountains, Mason suddenly said, "Dad, I talked to Mom on the phone last week." Nolan put down his fork and kept his expression calm. "Yeah? Is she okay?" "Not so good," Mason confessed. "She said she couldn't find a job in Toronto and was going to move to Calgary to start over." Nolan nodded, but didn't comment. As far as he knew, Audrey's infidelity was widely circulated in Toronto's real estate circles, seriously damaging her professional reputation. It wasn't a result of his deliberate actions, but it wasn't something he would have tried to prevent either. She also said she missed me and wanted to know if she could come visit me in Vancouver this summer. Mason continued, carefully watching his father's reaction. Nolan took a deep breath and thought about how to respond. He no longer felt that initial sharp pain, but the wound was still there. However, he also understands that no matter what Audrey has done, she is still Mason's mother. Cutting them off completely may not be a long-term solution. "If that's what you want," he finally replied, "I won't stop it. You're old enough to make decisions about your relationship with your mother. But I hope you understand that I may not be ready to see her yet." Mason nodded, seemingly relieved. "Thanks, Dad. I know this is hard for you." Nolan reached up and rubbed his son's hair, feeling a mixture of emotions. His revenge is complete. He has managed to protect himself and his son and rebuild their lives, while Audrey has lost everything. But revenge brings not the satisfaction he expected, but a calm acceptance and a determination to move on. "Whatever happens," he told Mason, "remember that we've survived the toughest part. Whatever the future holds, we will face it together." Mason smiled and nodded as the two continued to enjoy their dinner, talking about tomorrow's plans and future possibilities. Under the Vancouver night sky, they find themselves no longer victims of betrayal, but in control of their own destiny. As time passes, Audrey's life falls into a fall that cannot be reversed. The divorce proceedings lasted 6 months, and every step was a blow to her dignity. In court, she had to face Mason's testimony, his calm but firm statement that he wanted to live with his father. When she tried to meet her son's eyes, he avoided her gaze, which was more devastating than any legal judgment. The divorce is finalized with an equitable division of property, fair on the surface, but a complete failure for Audrey. She gained half the value of the property, but lost her family, her son's daily life, and the identity and sense of belonging that she had relied on for the past 15 years. Occupationally, the blow is more lasting. Despite her efforts to rebuild her client base, Toronto's real estate scene has relentlessly marginalized her. Her once proud list of high-end clients is now small, and most have found more reliable brokers. Her income plummeted, forcing her to adjust her lifestyle. Audrey has tried to establish phone contact with Mason, but the conversations are always awkward and painful. Her son's responses were brief and distant. He would answer her questions, but rarely offered to share his life. She could feel the coldness and distance in his voice. The way that child who had once loved her unconditionally now viewed her had changed forever. Dominic, the man who led her into the fire, completely disappeared when he learned her marriage was crumbling. A few months later, she stumbled across the fact that he had moved to New York via social media, where he was pictured standing with another woman, significantly younger than Audrey, with a big smile. The revelation sent a sharp wave of nausea through her, that she had sacrificed everything for such a superficial relationship. Economic woes are gradually becoming apparent. The divorce settlement gave her the equivalent of half the value of the property, but that money quickly began to shrink under the high rent and legal fees. She's tried to repolish her professional image, but Toronto seems to have closed its doors to her. Every interview, every potential client, seems to have heard the story of the realtor who cheated on his wife. As the year passes, Audrey's life becomes more and more lonely. She still lives in Toronto, but the city has become a prison for her, with ghosts of a happier past around every corner. She began to drink more frequently, seeking temporary paralysis to escape reality. "I don't understand why I can't let go," she told her therapist during a particularly emotional counseling session, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's been a year, but the pain is still so sharp." "Because you haven't really confronted your behavior," the therapist responded gently but directly. "You've been thinking about what Nolan did to you instead of what you did to him and Mason." The words pierced her heart like a sharp knife. In that moment, Audrey finally admitted the truth. "I didn't cheat because I didn't love Nolan or Mason, but because I didn't love myself. I've been looking for external validation, thinking that other people's longings will fill the emptiness inside me. But it only makes everything worse." This realization came too late. When Audrey finally realizes that she has everything she really needs, it has been destroyed by her own hand, and there is no way to get it back. Her life reached a low point the year after her divorce. After a serious work mistake costs her her last major client, her alcohol problem becomes worse, and her doctor begins to warn of her deteriorating health. That's when she received an email from Mason, the first time he'd reached out to her in months. "Mom, I'm going to college at UBC, studying electrical engineering, just like Dad. I thought you should know." Mason. A few short lines, no greeting, no warmth, but for Audrey it was like a ray of hope. He reached out to her, even if it was only to inform her of a fact. She replied immediately, expressing her pride and blessings, carefully suggesting that perhaps they could meet in Vancouver someday. Mason's reply came quickly, "Maybe, but not now." This tiny possibility gave Audrey a new direction. If Mason will be living in Vancouver, maybe she should move there too. But then she realized it could be interpreted as stalking or intrusive. No, she needed to give him space and at the same time find a fresh start for herself. After much deliberation, she decided to move to Calgary. Close enough to get to Vancouver when Mason is ready, but far enough away not to make him or Nolan feel invaded. What's more, it was a new city. No one knew about her past. No one would look at her with judgment. In Calgary, Audrey started a new life. She got a normal office job, nowhere near as glamorous as her former career, but at least it made ends meet. She gave up alcohol, started working out again, and even joined a book club in an effort to build a new social circle. However, despite the fact that on the surface life seemed to be getting better, the inner pain and remorse never subsided. Before going to bed, she still looks through the family photos saved on her cell phone, tears blurring the screen. Sometimes she would call Mason's number just to hear his voicemail greeting, then hang up after a few rings. 6 months after moving to Calgary, As Mason was approaching his 17th birthday, Audrey decided to write him a long letter. She spent weeks making drafts, writing and tearing them up until she found the right way to express her feelings. Dear Mason, as your 17th birthday approaches, I want to say something to you. I know I've lost the right to be a mother in your daily life, and it's entirely my own fault. There are no excuses, no defenses, only deep remorse. I will never be able to make up for what I did to you and your father, but I want you to know that I regret my choices every day. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I could go back to that moment and make the choice again. I will still be with you and your father, sharing in your growth and witnessing your success. I heard you got accepted to UBC to study electrical engineering. I am immensely proud of you, even though I know that this achievement is entirely due to your own support and that of your father. Maybe someday, if you're ready, we can meet again. Not the mother-son relationship of old. I know that's no longer possible, but maybe as two people who know each other. If that day never comes, I understand. In any case, I want you to know that I love you, and I'm incredibly sorry for the pain my behavior has caused you. Maybe someday you can find a way to forgive me, even though I know I don't deserve it. Love as always, Mom. She sent the letter along with a book on engineering, not expecting a reply, but wanting him to know she still cared about him. 2 weeks later, on a rainy Calgary morning, Audrey drove to the office. Her thoughts drifted off into the distance, imagining if Mason had gotten her letter, if he'd read it, or if he'd just throw it away. So focused on these thoughts, she didn't notice that the traffic light ahead had turned red or the large truck approaching from the left. The collision happened so quickly, she didn't even have time to feel fear. Doctors later said she died instantly and without pain. In her apartment, police found several bottles of antidepressants and a diary in which she recorded her remorse for the past and faint hope for the future. Mason was preparing for university entrance exams when the news reached Vancouver. Nolan learned the news from his sister Valerie, who was notified by Calgary police as one of Audrey's emergency contacts. When Nolan told Mason the news, the boy sat shocked and pale. But her letter, he whispered, her letter has only just arrived. In fact, it's only been 3 days since Mason received Audrey's letter, and he hasn't had a chance to respond, or even think about whether he should. Now that opportunity is gone forever. The news came as a punch to the gut, making it hard for both Nolan and Mason to breathe. Even though they had separated from Audrey, her sudden passing still brought with it an indescribable sense of loss and deep regret for all the words that had not been spoken, the reconciliation that had not been realized. Should we go to the funeral? Mason asked, uncertainty in his voice. Nolan didn't hesitate. Yes, we should go. No matter what happened, she's your mother and was my wife. They flew to Calgary for the funeral. There were very few people in attendance, mostly Audrey's new co-workers and a few distant relatives. Standing at the grave, Nolan felt a deep sadness, not only for Audrey's passing, but also for the marriage that had been so good but ultimately broken. He remembered the light in her eyes when they first met, the happiness on her face when Mason was born, and countless ordinary but precious family moments. It was a painful experience for Mason. He had thought he was numb to his mother's feelings, but standing in front of her coffin, all the suppressed emotions came flooding back like a tidal wave: anger, sadness, confusion, and, deepest of all, regret for all the times they would never be able to share. After the funeral, Audrey's attorney contacted Nolan to inform him that Audrey had left a letter for him and Mason. In the hotel room, they opened the envelope together and found 2 separately signed letters inside. Nolan's letter reads, Dear Nolan, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer alive. First of all, thank you for coming to my funeral, even though I wasn't sure you would. It took me a long time to really understand what I was doing to you and Mason. At first, I blamed it on circumstances, on you, even on Dominic. But in the end, I had to face the truth. It was entirely my own choice, my weakness, my selfishness. I used to think you didn't understand me, didn't know what I needed. But now I realize that it was I who never really understood the meaning of love. You gave me a stable home, unconditional support, and genuine love, and I was foolish enough to take it all for granted. I betrayed your trust and hurt your heart, and that was the biggest mistake of my life. Your revenge is perfect, Nolan. Not because it hurts me, but because it forces me to confront my behavior. You didn't yell at me, You didn't threaten me with violence. You just quietly walked away, taking Mason and our life together with you, leaving me alone with the ruins I'd created. That's more powerful than any public humiliation. I don't ask for forgiveness because some mistakes can't be forgiven. But I want you to know that I am overwhelmed with pain and remorse for my behavior. I hope you find new happiness in Vancouver, and I hope you are able to fall in love with someone again in a way that I will never be able to understand. With eternal gratitude and love, Audrey. Mason's letter takes on a different tone. Dear Mason, my son, my greatest pride and my deepest regret. By the time you read this, I will have left this world. I don't know if you will read this letter or attend my funeral, but either way, I hope to speak to you one last time. First of all, I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry I haven't been the kind of mother you deserve. I'm sorry I let my weakness and selfishness blind me to the pure joy you brought me. The loss of my time with you is my deepest pain, an indescribable emptiness that only those parents who have lost a child can understand. I heard you got accepted to UBC to study electrical engineering, just like your father. I'm incredibly proud of you, but not surprised. You've always been a smart, strong kid, far more mature than your years. I know you will achieve great things in life. My biggest regret is that I wasn't there to see you grow and succeed. I can't watch you graduate from college. I can't watch you fall in love and start a family of your own. But please know that wherever I am, I'm proud of you. Maybe you can't forgive me. I understand. But I hope that over time, as you go through more of life's ups and downs yourself, you'll be able to understand how easy it is for people to make mistakes they can't undo. Not to justify my behavior, but I hope you can learn from my mistakes. Cherish the ones you love, Mason. Don't be like me and sacrifice what really matters for fleeting thrills and false fulfillment. True happiness is not about excitement and novelty, but about people who are always there for you and love you unconditionally, just like your father loves you. I love you, my son, more than you can imagine. I wish you a future full of happiness and success, even if I can't be there to witness it. Love always, Mom. After reading the letter, a long silence fell over the room, filled only by the sound of the Calgary rain outside the window. Eventually, it was Mason who spoke first, his voice choked with emotion. She's really sorry, isn't she? Nolan nodded and felt tears well up in his eyes. Yes, she really regrets it. I should have responded to her letter sooner, Mason whispered, remorse clear on his young face. I've been thinking about whether or not to respond. What I want to say? There will never be a chance now. Nolan put his hand on his son's shoulder. Don't blame yourself, Mason. Sometimes it takes time to accept and understand what is happening. Your mom knows this. The important thing is that she knows you received her letter and that her love and remorse have been communicated to you. Together, they returned to Vancouver with a mixture of emotions, sadness, regret, acceptance, and thoughts about the future. For Nolan, Audrey's death brings a strange kind of relief, not from the satisfaction of revenge, but from finally being able to let go of the pain and anger of the past. In the years that followed, Nolan and Mason continued their life in Vancouver. Mason enrolled in college to study engineering, following a similar path as his father. He excelled, graduated with honors, and the transition from college to the workplace was almost seamless. Nolan eventually meets a woman named Elise, a child psychologist who is gentle but strong and understands his past without judgment. In the beginning, their relationship developed slowly because Nolan still had a fear of intimacy. But Elise's patience and understanding eventually helped him open up. Although they are not married, they have developed a healthy and mutually respectful partnership. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Nolan thinks of Audrey, not with resentment, but with an understanding of the impermanence of life. His once vengeful plan had succeeded, but the end result had been so tragic, far beyond his expectations or hopes. If he could do it all over again, would he choose the same path? He's not sure. Revenge brings a fleeting sense of satisfaction and justice, but it doesn't really heal the wounds. It just leads everyone to an irrevocable end. Mason also remembers his mother from time to time, especially at important moments in his life, graduating from college, his first job, meeting someone important. He would imagine what she would say and do if she were still alive. Over time, he learned to forgive her and to forgive himself for failing to express that forgiveness while she was alive. One weekend, 5 years after Audrey's death, Nolan and Mason went for a walk in Stanley Park, which had become a tradition for them. As they stood on the beach, watching the waves of the Pacific Ocean, Mason asked, "Dad, do you regret your decision? That's how you leave and cut off all contact with your mom." Nolan thoughtfully replied, "I don't regret protecting us and giving us a chance to start over. But I do hope that we can have a chance to reconcile before it's too late. The satisfaction of revenge is fleeting, but the opportunity lost is permanent." Mason nodded, understanding his father's words. "I think Mom's story teaches us that every decision has consequences and some mistakes can't be undone. But at the same time, forgiveness is not for the sake of the other person, but for our own sake." Yes, Nolan agrees. It teaches us the importance of love and forgiveness, not only forgiving others, but also forgiving ourselves. When we are betrayed, the most natural reaction is to seek revenge and make the other person experience the same pain. But true healing comes from learning to let go, not from grasping at straws. "Do you think Mom found peace at the end?" Mason asked, gazing at the distant horizon. "I think she found some form of peace," Nolan mused. "Not a perfect reconciliation, but an acknowledgement and acceptance of her behavior. Sometimes that's the best we can hope for." They continued their walk along the shoreline, talking about future plans and hopes. Behind them, the setting sun dyed the water's gold, as if it were a beautiful farewell to the past and a warm blessing for a new life. And somewhere along the way, Audrey's story becomes a warning to others. Love is a gift to be cherished. Betrayal is a wound that can't be easily mended. And there are some choices, once made, that change the course of a life forever. But just as importantly, it also becomes a story about the power of forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it can liberate the future. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.